mau satisfy kayaknya dari sini tapi effortnya buat belajar jadi dia berinteraksi pasti bisa saya to make sure saja ini apa keinginannya itu juga iya mas pakai YouTube juga wow
nanti yang dikirim link YouTube-nya aja
so gitu berarti mereka nggak bisa nanya apa-apa ya
nanti nanya di YouTube bisa
oh bisa
yeah. Chat tapi chat
Yeah, also, all slides that I made that's on use. There is the focus on the actual photos that don't those you'll see some of the slides with text like that. That's fine. That's this. So that's some action. How do I control this? Like both of them? So I do that from a distance, right? So I will open by your business bank or to copy it. Yeah, you can copy this one out. Yeah, because the CV needs to send yeah, with the yeah, he just put it there. Okay, then I'll load the other one down. It's another one that we need.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can download it from here. You can just put it here. That's fine. There's another one. It's down as well. Yeah, over there. No, it's okay. I'll do it from my computer. Yeah, okay. So now we have to try if this one works. Yes.
Sorry, I need to click this one
Huh?
first. Let's sample. I'm sorry.
What? No, that's not mine.
No, for this. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Okay. Let's try.
Okay.
This is your.
All right.
Let's try.
Oh, okay. All right. Where do I point? Where is it? Oh, here.
That one. This backward is forward.
Yeah. Yeah. There.
And maybe you need to try.
Yeah. So.
And then you need to try right there, maybe, because you will be sitting there.
So all the one that text you can use.
Okay.
That's because they're all, I made those.
So you can say next to me.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. Oh, you want me to try it from here?
Yeah.
The oh, that's it. That's something. Yeah. I can't afford these people, so they. Yeah, that's also, oh yeah, yeah, that's a little bit worried about, this is late. So why don't I sitting here? So I'm gonna sit here for this. You shouldn't sit here, because I'm gonna do this thing here. On your eyes, they say so that. First, you use me, Steve.
Oh, it's my heart.
No, you want me to download it?
Oh, I got it.
There. Alright, so I'm glad you said that.
Oh.
Because I have to use these things.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah. The ladies are. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Start being from here.
Next.
Getting up in the eyes.
One of those, I know this one.
Oh.
One that you bring first one.
Where is the reception? Where do I point it? All the way there. So not there.
Di sebenarnya Pak Par itu nggak apa? Ya.
Atau yang sini.
Jangan kurang geranya ini.
Oh, bisa ke sini.
Ya.
Sampai biasa. Sampai iya. Enggak, tapi di sini. No, here was. Not here was because of this meeting and then because of the right.
Yeah, the pointer has to go there.
Oh iya.
Silakan tadi, siang cepat-cepat. Oh iya. Ya, ya, ya.
I think it's close. Sorry.
You also need your back, right?
No, I didn't know even Java was so big.
It is classification.
Yeah. Your back, yeah. Dalam kalau dia bahasa Inggris, kalau nggak nanti kemudian bisa diinterpret. Ya, sambil betul-betul kasih. Tahu tak ya? Tahu ya.
Sorry, where's the receiver for the laser?
This one. Here. So that's the point. Pointed to this machine. Is it not that they well?
Huh?
I mean, it's not well.
Can we try? First we delay.
Oh, delay.
Delay. If I stand up and.
Yeah.
Laser. That's where the laser is. So you shouldn't sit there. For the eyes. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah. Stop it. This is a receptacle. Oh. Good.
Oh, but it's delay. It's the delay.
It's this thing.
Do you want to use this? You want to
It's still not working very well.
try this? This one.
Oh,
This
is
one.
now another one? It's the same issue, it's the same issue. It's this thing. It's this thing.
Oh, this one, this one.
See how it's going. There's a delay.
Oh, yes, to
Yeah.
Or maybe you can just say next to me and then I'll next the slide.
How would really can you just mention next and then I can help.
Yeah, I have to sit here,
Okay.
because that's the one, that's the reception.
Well, the next really, well, the next well set, really.
Yeah, sit there. Yeah, that's about for the slides.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. See what you mean. You can see it like this.
Good that you always bring this one, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Tapi itu ya tapi kalau dia kata ada bukan enggak
Oh, itu ya.
orang itu
Oh, itu ya.
dia kan di nomor semua ini yes. All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. We start our session with Professor Dimana. He will give us a general lecture with the title. The title is Time Traveling Trees. Question Reading Archival Aerial Photography in Namibia, Indonesia, and beyond. So it's a comparative study about environmental history in some countries in Asia and Africa. Yeah. So let's say global south. Before we begin, I will read a little bit and maybe introduce you the curriculum today or academic background of Professor Krieger. Professor Krieger is an expert in a professor in two major academic fields, that is environmental history and environmental science. He had the PhD in history department here in 1996 with the thesis Recreating Eden, Agroecological Change, Food Security and Environmental Diversity in Southern Angola and Northern Namibia, 1890 to 1960. And he also had his PhD in environmental science, especially in tropical forestry, School of Environmental Science, Wageningen, in the Netherlands, with the thesis Architects of Nature, Environmental Infrastructure, and the Nature Culture Economy in 2006. And it's now his position is director in Africa Studies program from 2018 and 2000 until 2021. And also director for African Studies program in 2001 and 2004. He has some publication and books, especially books about environmental study, ones here, sports and environmental warfare as crime against humanity and nation. Princeton University Press, 2021. Environmental infrastructure in African history, examining the myth of natural resource management in Namibia, Cambridge University Press, 2013. And deforestation in Namibia, the global consequence of local contradiction. The publication is from April 2010. Yeah, so now he will give us lecture about how method of using aerial photography can be used for environmental study and how it can be applied to the global south. Okay, for Professor Peter, time is yours.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here. So, have to come back here many times. I would like to thank many people, including the professor. Yeah, a lot of course. I would like to thank Professor Xiao Bata, Dean of the Faculty, Professor Dr. Sakawi, Vice Dean, Dr. Jody Shairi, sorry for the names, Chair of the Department of History, for the general hospitality, a wonderful welcome, and for inviting me to share my research with fellow teachers and students. I would also like to thank Professor Dr. Ferdinand Bassito, who was instrumental in encouraging me to visit Slovenia and assured me that I was welcome at University of Slovenia, which proved to be more. I would also like to thank Dr. Adito Dimagono, producer, for welcoming me, and the Dewi Mirja Sharwati, who has been just very wonderful, assisting me to many things, including for all of Eastern Europe, to visit historical sites. And she also provided me with an outstanding student assistant during my visit to Mr. Freeman Putra on the one now. Now, I have to warn you a little bit. I have to apologize a little bit because I put a lot in one single lecture. This is actually originally was 2 lectures. So you will get an overview of what I'm doing, but it's probably a little bit much and a little bit theoretical. But maybe next year when I hope to come back, I can do maybe a workshop and divide it up in maybe 3 or 4 lectures so that it becomes more clear what the methodology is. So today, I think what you're getting out of it, you might not get all the details, but I think you will get a very good idea of what this project is about. So I apologize if you don't get it all, because that's not your fault, it's actually my fault, because I'm trying to do too much in one lecture. Okay. And of course, at the end, we have some time you can ask questions about this. Okay, so this is a project I gave this lecture earlier about oral history. These are not, the projects are related, but they're not the same project. Because the oral history feeds into two different projects. One is a book project, that was my early lecture, which will be, the idea is to write a book like this. So this book is an earlier book I did, Sport Earth, and it has 10 case studies, 10 different countries, including actually some in Indonesia, about environmental warfare, how during warfare armies intentionally targeted the environment that people were dependent on. And this volume looks at the conquest of the Americas by the European colonists, so in the 16th century, until after World War I. But that stops. So the current book I'm doing is sort of volume 2, right? That was my lecture a couple of weeks ago about volume 2, and that's 12 or 13 case studies from post-World War II era, but looking at how this environmental warfare actually continued in another area. In there, one or maybe two of the chapters are on Indonesia. So that's why I traveled around also to understand the history of Mr. Rodenberg, right? Has been very kind and very helpful, and both the work with in his work. So that's sort of the oral history project, and there will be hopefully the chapter based on oral history and Dutch colonial sources about what's happening in these wars in the environment. So that's one problem. But the oral history is also important because it feeds into this project. And I'll explain this during the lecture how that works. So the oral history is very critical for history because, as you know, many things are not written in the books. Right? And sometimes the archives are not there, but in the archives, can you hear me even if I don't hear sound there? If I talk like this, you can hear me, Matt? Yes. Right, so oral history, as I will explain, is also important to for the other code. And I just want to point out a few things about the titles so that you understand that. So oral history, as you know, is the oldest form of history. But before we were writing history, people were already telling the stories orally from generation to generation. Right? You have many you have been recently in the movies, the Odyssey, for instance, right? But there are many examples also in Indonesia of stories that were originally transferred from generation to generation and so oral history is the oldest form of history. So I'm trying to combine it with maybe what's the newest form of history, and that is actually history that uses machine reading, that uses computers. And it has some implications because as I will show, right? Actually, we talk about AI, and AI will take over, but in my project, I'm understanding actually, no, the AI can't take over completely. It can help us to do a lot, but ultimately, you need, so in my case, you need the oral history, and you need the historians to actually explain the story, because the AI can't explain, right? It shows things, and it tries to identify patterns, but it does not explain. So people will remain central, actually, even in the period of AI. Okay, long intro, but let me just go into this. Oh yeah, time traveling trees. I have to say something. Trees, this sounds weird, and I will be too quick on it, but trees are actually, in many landscapes, the most stable feature. I surprise you because we talk about deforestation, which is a big problem in Indonesia. But actually, for this project, if you look at aerial photography, there are actually, and I look at rural landscapes, not urban landscapes. It's mainly focused on rural landscapes, although it has many implications also for urban landscapes, which I will mention at the end. But in a rural landscape, trees are often the most stable feature. Because they live long. And people's houses move around, and this is especially true in environments where people have to move a lot. It's because of war, natural disasters, right? The trees, for instance, they survive over tsunamis. People's home now. Right? So that's why the trees are actually very important. Okay, let me get into the slides. Quote very carefully. Yeah, is this one? Okay, all right. So, historical era photography. Don't forget, there's so historical era photography, but they use very, very little for general history and for environmental history. It has enormous potential, as I hope I will show, but it's also very difficult to use. It offers three major opportunities, but it also has three major challenges. So, right, one, so the opportunities is number one, right? There are enormous amounts of these photographs since the 1940s. There might be tens of it, there are certainly tens of millions, there might even be hundreds of millions of photographs that are taken from here. Of the Earth land territories, and they're mostly produced between the 1940s and 1990. After 1990, they don't use that much anymore because we've satellite. And they were used mainly to create detailed maps. So all the maps from the 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s, they're based on aerial film. Now, also, they were produced pretty regularly. So all colonial and independent states, they did aerial surveys, photographing their entire land territory every 5 or 10 years on average. Right? So as a historian, like you can compare, right? You can compare, say, if there's a photograph of East Java, 1945, and there is another one covering 1960, one 1970, one 1980, you can see how the landscape environment changed. And then you can't just only see the landscape, you can actually see very big details. You can follow individual trees and wells, because the resolution of this aerial photograph is very high. You can see everything that's about 1 meter. So people you can't see, except maybe Schwarzenegger, other bodybuilders, they are big enough, right? They're more than 1 meter, so you can see that. But people you can normally not see. Now, and I mentioned satellite imagery, satellite imagery, but satellite imagery before 2000 actually has a very bad resolution. Only from 2000 onwards, the satellite imagery has the same resolution as aerial photography had since the 1930s. So that means it is a source that goes much deeper than satellite images. Now, there are also challenges, and you see those screen at the bottom in highlighted in thick scripture. Aerial photographs are very difficult to find. So here for right now, I haven't been in Jakarta yet. That's probably where they are. But it's very difficult to actually locate. I thought that would be the easiest part of my project. It turns out it's the most challenging part. Why is that? As many of you are historians, so you like archives. But as you know, it takes a while before things go to an archive and become accessible. Sometimes it takes 70, 80 years. Now, with aerial photograph is a big problem. Because one, historians don't really see it as a source. And the second part is related to that, because until about 2000, aerial photographs were used to make maps. They were also used by the military, that we use for planning, urban development, to plan for dams and development in general. So that we're used all the time and that we're very critical resource. So, and right now, right, although since about 2000, they're no longer very useful, with old stuff, historic stuff, because they have not been acknowledged as an important source for history, they are in the gray zone, they're in the middle. They're not in the archive, and they're not really no longer actively used. So that means many of them are displayed in offices or in dusty archives, but they're not accessible. And that is I found out that is a very big challenge, and also they're very vulnerable. So the best way to use that is to scan the negatives. But the negatives are extremely vulnerable. And if it's too hot, too humid, they will be destroyed. And even the photographs themselves, they are very vulnerable. So you need, if there's no climate control, no air conditioning, they will not last very long. So this is also important that so I hope my project will also contribute to showing how important this historic source for many fields of history, and hopefully then people start to become aware and they start archiving these resources because they're really incredible. It's really a really very important resource for historians. The last point, the other 2 points are a little bit longer. So right now, you can only interpret them manually, one by one. You have to look at them and see, oh, this is the house, this is the well, this is the tree, this is this. This is called labeling in computer language. That is very time consuming, and you need to know what you're seeing. And so that interpretation of aerial photographs goes by hand. That means you can only do a few. So people have used aerial photographs, but usually historians, even geographers, environmental scientists, but they usually only use a few because it's way too much work to analyze things. You can't do it yet with computers. So that's what my project is trying to do. And what is new is people have used that extra for computer analysis, but not at high resolution, only at very big resolution. So you can see forests, but not the trees. So my project is trying to change. And for this is where oral history comes in. Because 1940s, 1950s, the environment looked very, very different. People, the same is true here in DCR. So you need historical data in order to interpret what you see on photos. And archival data usually, it can be used too, and I'm using that too. But it usually doesn't, archival data usually don't talk about the life of common people. They have chicken, chickens, what do their homes look like? That kind of information is usually not the archives, because the archives are usually about, wars and generals, and kings and presidents, but not about people and how they lived and what they lived in. Right. Okay. So now, okay, so oral, so I'm going to talk a little bit about potential and the challenges of aerial photography. Now, I said this already. See, the oral history is very critical because it has some very interesting features. So first, what I said, it's the so-called, it's the common people. Right? So they can talk about common life. in archives about, past president or past king, there are not going to be descriptions of how the people lived, and what their homes looked like. Or, if they had chickens or something, what kind of trees they had in the garden. That's not in it. But oral history, so in oral history, we have that information, but also it's interactive. You can still talk to people, ask them. So that's what we do in the interview. Ask them, okay, when you were a child, what did the home of your parents look like? What was it made of? How many rooms did it? Did you have a kitchen? Right? There was the kitchen attached to the house. It was part of the house. Did you have a little house for chickens, for cattle? Right? What kind of trees did you have around the house? How far away from the fields? What was in the fields? Right? We can still ask these things, so that can help us actually interpret what you can see on the aerial photographs, right, from the childhood, which would be, aerial photographs in the 40s and 50s. So that's basically the idea. But of course, there's also a challenge for oral history. One is the chronology. You never know exactly what time they're talking about, because if you interview them today and you talk about the past, so people start mixing, right, different temporalities, different times in their stories. So that's a little bit tricky, of course. And also, and this is maybe the oral history is, but maybe my main source that I've been using in my career. And this is its biggest advantage and the biggest disadvantage. It's qualitative. If I talk to, say, my grandfather or grandmother, they tell me their story. This is what I like. And I don't want them to talk about, being so, who they didn't really know. I want them to talk about what did they see, what did they experience, how is life when they're young. That's what I really want. And that's right, qualitative, but it's a little bit frustrating for an environmentalist who don't authority like me. Because I don't know how representative my grandfather's story is for life in those days. Maybe my grandfather was a very exceptional man and had a very unusual life. Right, so that is always very, and you can do simply, so I have a methodology where I basically do interview in a large region, right? And I try to go to about 15 to 20 different villages in rural areas and interview 2 men and 2 women in each of them. That's sort of the idea. It doesn't always work out that way, right? So that I get sort of, right, because as an environmentalist, we want to know what's happening, right? For instance, in each year, not just what happens to Surabaya, because, Jember is very different from Surabaya, obviously, right? It's seen a little bit now. So that's frustrating. But, as you will see, the aerial photographs is almost the opposite. So if you can use, right, if you can apply this aerial to the aerial photographs, you get a very different picture. Right. Oops, sorry. Now, I don't want it. Okay, so now I'm giving you an example. Oh, no, this is the right one, sorry. So I press the mark, it goes twice. Okay, now I'm going to give you here the example, so I'm going to talk to you how we do this. Right? How can you combine oral history with aerial photographs to have a better idea of the past? Then, of course, I would love to show you from PCR, but I haven't done the research, so I can't really show you. Right, so I'm going to use a case where I already did complete much of this research with oral history and combining it with aerial photography. Right, so that's in the middle, as you see now, most of my books are in Arabian, so that's the next time. No. So this is what you're going to look at. So this is a homestead, right, farm, and you can see it's quite. This is of a local head of the village. So it's, you know, a lead person, so, it's way bigger than, most people had in that time, but this is basically what it is. Right, as you can see, two round features, right? So the outer feature, that is a fence. The farm fence. And the inner feature is actually a palace, because these houses, all the houses and the huts and the storage rooms and the reception room for the guests, it's all open air. But they're all surrounded by a palace. Walls, here, I'll show you some pictures. And then there's all kind of features, you see a tree there, you see in the lower corner to the left, that is actually a local well. Right, you see trees, fields, etc. So keep this in mind, because I'm trying to help you sort of visualize what you see in the aerial photographs, because what you see in the aerial photographs are very abstract, it's like a map without an explanation. So this is this palisade. You see the back palisade are lower. And here, this is from oral history, the views I did there. So this man is talking about, you see the big palisade poles standing in front. Those he kept from his grandfather's original palisade. So that's, he's talking about the 1920s. So some of these poles have still survived, and he puts that sort of in the middle of his home, it's sort of memory, heritage to show, this is what my grandfather lived here already. But this is in the 90s, and you could see people were still doing it, but they were a little bit lower because they're running out of wood that's long enough. Right, but so here you can sort of get an idea of he's probably coming, there, okay, now I got it. So this is a photo of one of these homesteads. It's probably the one from the drawing, actually, in the 1930s. Right, so you get a sense. So these are the huts or the homes, the houses of the people live in, and everything is so surrounded by these palisades. Yeah, and including in it is not only huts or sleeping rooms, but it's also grain stores. This is actually a huge grain. See, there's a basket under it. That's where they store the grain. They're smeared on the inside with clay. So they actually work very well. They preserve this grain for 3 to 5 years without insects. And as you can see, some holes so that insects can't get in. Rats can't get in, and there's a roof that. Right. So this is all right. So this is all to help us interpret the features we see. Here you see that on a photo from about 1928, right? So see the yellow, the orange one. So the yellow one is actually the roof that is not covered with grass yet. The one with the orange is a roof, but it's a roof of a homestead, it's not a hut to sleep in, but it's the grain storage. As you can see, they're a little bit smaller. So if you compare them with the huts, you see those roofs a little bit smaller. And then to the right is actually, under the green is one of these baskets without a roof still standing. Right, and this is the kitchen. Kitchens are usually roofs that are open. And this is sort of the typical landscape of North Namibia, with the yellow in the middle. Behind the cattle is actually the millet. It's almost ripe. It's like in Jabea, the stalks of the sugarcane have that color now too, and they're being harvested. And you can see palm trees to the left. Oh, there are big fruit trees there, they're huge. To the right, cattle and goats in the foreground. And here's one of those big trees. This is why these trees are so important. They dominate the landscape. We can identify those, I will show you. They're very big trees. This is me, I'm a little bit younger then, maybe a little bit taller. But as you can see, I'm standing on top of the car because I'm trying to get some of the food. The food is really delicious. Right, and here this is an oblique photo. There are two kinds of photographs from aerial, and one is oblique, it's like this, a little bit at an angle. Right, so you see better what it represents. But most aerial photographs are not like this. And this is not the ones I use because these are not really useful for what they are, but they are better to identify. And this is actually a photo from 1928 also. So you see, right, these circles, is the Palisades with the huts in it. But if you probably can't see, you see even some trees here. It's a very weird photo. The negative is probably damaged. Right, so here you see this round palisade that is the homes are in. Right, here's another one. And here, I don't know if you can see that. That's actually two palm trees standing next to one another. Here's another tree. And here, probably can't see that, it's like an eye. It's a circle with a slightly light interior. Then there's a very dark spot in the middle. Those are actually water holes. The spot is about this size. So we managed to identify, and the computer also, once we trained the computer, it could identify even these water holes. And again, they're very small. Right, so here you see a little bit of landscape and a few more photos so that you get a sense of the landscape. Oh, that's all. Oh yeah, no, I'm sorry, I got a little bit confused, but I'm not sure if. Okay, so this is historical area photographs. Okay, so this is some of their features. Some of it, I talked about before, but now I'll make it a little bit more specific because you have seen some of the area photographs. Okay, and this goes back also what I said in the beginning about AI, right? Photographs, we usually say photographs of more than 2,000 words or 1,000 words, right? That's not true. If you have no context, no explanation, you have no idea what you see. Think of this. If you have a family album and you have your great parents in, right? But you don't know who they are, there's no text. You know nothing. You just see photos. Photos need context or explanation. Or else it's very difficult to interpret. Also, right, you now saw oblique ones, they are at an angle. So the plane is flying like this and the photo is like this. But most aerial photographs are verticals. So it's like a map, you see that from the top. So a home is a round, a circle, or a square. The tree is a circle. Right? So it's very abstract and it's 2D. So that's also very difficult, but the photos overlap. Tile roof, right? Old clay tile roofs. The tiles overlap. Aerial photographs do too. And in old days, they used to have a little diopter, and if you then put them like this, with the diopter, you could see a 3D image, but only your head. But about 5 years ago, they managed to recreate this with computer modeling. So that's also what we do in this project. We have a few computer modeling people, and they can actually create a 3D image. So imagine, this is sort of my dream, right? So this area, I mean, if you ever did a computer game or, a game where you go into the environment with an avatar, moving in it. Well, so my dream is that you can actually do this with the aerial photographs. You can model the aerial photographs in 3D. They can actually walk through the real environment, right? If you do a computer game, it's recreated. Right? It's drawn. But these aerial photographs, they are representations of the real environment. So in theory, if you do the 3D modeling, you can just go into the picture. Right? You walk in that environment. Now, I don't know if we're gonna manage that in this project, but that's sort of, has been my dream for long, so it would be a form of time travel. Which I've been excited about since even before I was born. All right, now, again, I said that, right, but I want to remind you, because it's very critical, right? Especially since we're using AI. Classification of features visible, identification of what you see on the pictures, right, which is called labeling. I'm using this word because you will hear, if you haven't heard it, you will hear a lot with AI, you hear a lot about labeling. Right? Labeling the machine, right? You know the challenges with interpreting photos by AI, right? You know it doesn't do very well. It says, you know, if it would be a photo of our meeting, right? And AI, Google AI, has to make sense of it. It will say meeting of men and women at a meeting. The rest doesn't know anything unless it sees, of course, unless it can see, oh, Universiteit Erlangen, that will say meeting of men and women at Erlangen University, probably some kind of lecture. That's the most it can do. So historical information is actually very critical for labeling, just as that's what they're doing now with social media, right? You know, WhatsApp, the information you put on WhatsApp, it's not connected to you, but it's being used to train AI. Right? That's why all these Google and Meta are interested in supporting to Facebook, because they're using all this data, right, to train AI. So we need to do that too, within this way. The whole not with safe results, sorry. Okay. Now again, again to remind you, aerial photographs are sub 1 meter resolutions. You see incredible details, trees, wells, see some. Now, and this is an interesting one. So processing, remember that I said all history is qualitative. If we combine the aerial photography analysis with GIS and AI, we can actually measure and count everything we see as long as we live. We have to label stuff. But then we can count and label everything. We can count the number of trees. We can see what size they are. And we can compare from the 1940 series to the 1950 series, to the 1960s, 70s, 80s. So we can actually see how these trees are growing and fast. And you can do this with everything. Fences, you can count almost everything you see, as long as that's the key. As long as you can label it first. We have to identify. And with historical information, historical areas photographs, that means you need historical information. See? So if you're storing, there is a future for us in this too, because you won't be able to use this stuff without historical data and historical analysis also. And then, okay. And then if you use AI, machine learning, right, you can actually, you can train the machine. But again, I want to say, you need to do human labeling first, the historical information, and that information you use to train machine, computer, and a computer can be, at least that's what our cases show. Right, now I'll show you some. Right, so this is a vertical view, just like a map, not an oblique view at an angle. This is also an aerial photo. This is a satellite image, very high resolution. And it shows also this environment, but from the top. So these dots are all trees. But it's not only the trees, also the shade. Right, so you see that all these trees are actually round, but there's a shade, of course. Right. And here the homesteads, notice they're not round anymore, because this is from 2004. Photos with the round ones, when they used to be round, that was a tradition. These are all from before World War II. as they, this became missionized, Christianized, and the missionaries thought that round, that's the devil, you need square, that's regular, right? So people started doing square. These are fields. If you see lines, you see lines here, these are all fences. Okay, I'll move a little bit faster now. I think the basic idea. Okay, so I'm going to show you the photo. This is northern. Press to the line. Yeah, so this is northern and maybe on the boundary with Angola. This is a map. And the arrow points to Chicago, and I'll show you some aerial photographs of different periods from Chicago. It's very sensitive also. So this is Chicago on an aerial photograph. It's actually composite set of photographs from 1943. You can see under the arrow, that's Chicago. There's basically nothing there. The only thing that was there in 1943 was the residence of the local colonial official. That was all that was. And a few homesteads around it, villagers. But that was it. And this is actually, if you zoom out, it's the same place, right? But you can see there's very little there. Right, and this is actually the same place. Right? Arrow points to it in 1972. See, there's a little bit more activity there, and there's the arrow points. You see that little square thing with a sort of a circle, a roundish thing in it. That there's actually a dam and a water reservoir that they built, so that the native commissioner could take a bath once a week. And this is the same area of Chicago in 2004. As you can see, it's a small town. Yeah, I'm sorry, it was just showing how it changed over time. Oh. But the point is here, right, and this is in 2024, right? But it shows how this environment, right? In 1943, there was nothing there really. Now it's not a big town, but a fair size town. So the environment has changed, right? Very relevant. Oops. Okay, this is another oblique, and it shows the black one is points to one of these homesteads, right? And the quality is not so good of some of these. And you see the white. I don't know if you see the white arrows, you see a line running. That's the fence around the entire plot. Right, so these fences actually allow us to see what the plot size is. And I'll show you in a few minutes. Right, and here's again an oblique, a black and white oblique from the 90s actually, that shows you a tree. And here you see very clearly shade. Right, that's a little bit of a trick. Right, because if you don't know that there's a shade and you look at this picture, see that this shows that it's not so simple to interpret these arrow photographs. And an AI, it might pick up the tree, but there's no way it will be able to distinguish between the tree and the shade, unless you train it to do so. By itself, you just see the black spot. So it counts the pixel and says round thing. See more if you could put one comment here. This is sort of a close-up of the Chicago photo you saw first. So the arrow to the left, the white one points to this water reservoir, it's big. The yellow one points actually to the residence of the native commissioner. The white ones that you see on the right point to these homesteads, right? And this is actually 1972. Some of them are still around. So we know, for instance, from historical information that the square ones are usually crystals. The round ones are usually not crystals. So you see, so you can even derive when you have historical information, you can even interpret that as a historian to say something about culture. And here I'm labeling. So this is our methodology as such. So we use this historical information, especially in oral history, is critical to be able for us to identify what you see called arrow photographs. Then what I do is I create training data. So for a 10 km square area, I do everything by hand. Like I say, this is what you see here. So here you see the result, you see the green arrow points to a round circle. That is a tree crown, without the shade. And so I did that everywhere by hand. And in one series, I did 5,000 trees by hand. And they are by size, because this is combined with GIS. So actually the size of the circle indicates the size of the crown of the tree seen from the top. Because this is all geo-rectified and auto-rectified. So these are real, the sizes you derive from here are the real world sizes. And you see the orange one points to a homestead also, right? I did by hand, I drew the outside of the homestead to see what the size of the homestead is. So we can also calculate things by that and identify that. And the brown ones point to the fence that is around the entire farm. So it indicates the size of the plot. And the blue ones, that was the ones that surprised us. There's those water holes. Although they are the actual water hole, the well, is usually about this size. But it forms a very distinct sort of eye-like pattern. Right, and here you see the same thing, but on a sort of larger scale. And I identify all these things. So that's creating the training data. Yeah. Okay, now before you can do that, you know, it seems easy, but it's actually not so easy because you have to also put the photograph together. Because in most cases, this is what we find in the archive. You find either the actual photos, so thousands of them, tens of thousands of them, hundreds of thousands of them, right? They all have numbers, right? But you have to put that together like a puzzle. And for the puzzle, you know, if you do a puzzle, okay, it's a little bit old-fashioned, like I did as a kid, it's a long time ago, so maybe the young ones and ones who don't know what a puzzle is, right? But the puzzle you need to cover, right? Because you need frogs, so there's no way you can do a puzzle. So for aerial photography, you have a similar thing that's called a flight plan. Flight plans are very critical. You usually have to find them in the archives. They're often not with the photograph itself, and the photograph is a set category if you put them somewhere. Right? So the flight plans often have to go to the archives to find them. And these are critical because you see all kind of lines. It gives all the numbers of the photos. All the photos themselves have a number on the photo itself, because without that, it would be impossible. So they have all the numbers, and this indicates how the plane is flying, and it indicates the numbers. So this one is number 50 is here, 60 is there, right? And the photos in between, 51, 52, they're in between, obviously, right? And it shows exactly the position. You usually use a map to do this, so that you can see, and you need that to fit the photos together, like the pieces in the puzzle. Right, so here you see, here we have the photos arranged, right, where they are. This is important because this is called rectifying, right? Because we want these photos to be exactly where they belong in the real world. Because we do all this, it's extra important for us because we do sub 1 meter. So we can follow the same tree, right, throughout the history. That's the idea. This is a complicated process, but we have been able to sort of semi-automatize this. Because for one case, so if we do this for East Java, for instance, if there are 5 or 6 time series for East Java as a whole, there might be anything between 25 and 30,000 photos. Right? So it's very important that we can say my output this. Because if we do that all by hand, I'll get a puzzle, 50,000 puzzle pieces, that's a lot of work. Oh, I'll try again, I might skip one. Oh, oops. And this is actually the first same photographs stitched together. And now it's ortho rectified. That means also because photos are flat, but the Earth isn't. So we also correct for all that kind of material. Again, I'm not doing this on my own, all right? Because I don't know how to do most of this. I'm just I have sort of, I'm the dream guy, say I need this and this and this, and then I have people in my team and they know they can put it together. But they're all specialists, so they need me to put it all together too, because they don't understand what their, what their purpose is. See, so that's why as a historian, I can lead a team that includes hardcore scientists and computer scientists. Sorry, it goes a little bit slow. I think the computer is trying, the AI is trying to learn to do this by itself. It's trying to take over from me. What I should have said, because now it really starts. Okay. Okay, so all right, so basically, okay, so I did this on 10 kilometers by hand, labeled it for 1943 series, 1972 series. Then we use that as training data for the computer, and the computer repeated the thing for the same features. Right? We did it with 2 or 3 features, so trees, fences, homesteads, and wells, or 4 features. And then it repeated the same process by itself with AI for 200 square meters. And the first time was a complete disaster. Messed it up completely. It had only 25% correct. But the second time when we used a little bit different method, it actually was 96% correct. So now we have put a protocol that we are using that protocol, and then we're going to go back to it and by hand take again and look at 10 square kilometers that the computer did and then correct that. So that we're correcting the computer and hopefully we can get it up to 98%. 100% is not possible. So I'll just show you a few. So here you see trees. Right, and here you see how that starts looking like hard more at the distance, because it's doing it on 200 square kilometers. So these are the trees. The red it shines through is actually fences. Right, so if you go, I give you the close-up, because if you see it on a large area, you can't see the machine knows what it's doing. Right, so here you see a close-up just to show you what the machine is doing. So here it's highlighting the homestead, the trees. All right, so this is sort of a little repetition very quickly, sort of what the methodology is, right? So to the left, you see what is a tree. So you need historical information, right? And then you can, if you see, you follow the arrow down, the little green, that's what it looks like on an oblique from the side. And then if you go to number 2, up at the top, that's what you see on the vertical. You see sort of a black dot, right? And that dot is then identified, labeled by size, by position, and then you can count it and measure it. Right, the same is true with the homestead, right? The yellow one, the yellow line. You see at the top, the yellow borderline indicated, and at the right you see it by size. right? Same water holes, blue, right? Blue in the middle, and then indicated by size, and the same again for the fences. So that you can locate everything, you can count it, you can measure it, and you can compare how it changes between one series of photographs to another. As you can see, historical change. Okay, so here I'm just showing that how complementary the two are, right? Oral history is audio written, right? And aerial photographs is images and visual modeling. Now, this is very critical also from the point of indication, because as you know, the younger generation, they use their phone, they do not read big books. They do not read usually books like this, they're not very popular. Right? You guys have to sometimes, but youth, no. Right, so the aerial photographs, you can do all kinds of incredible YouTubes, movies, virtual reality, but they're not really virtual reality because it's actually the real depiction of the environment in the past. Like everything is small, of course, but it is better than any game could accomplish. Right? So it means that it offers a type of sources, right, that is much closer to the interests and the sort of culture, if I may say that, of younger generations. So it could be a very, very powerful tool for education at all levels, I think. Second thing is, right, oral history is qualitative, this is quantitative. And so that it has a real world spatiality and locality if combined with GIS. Right, so it's very specific, but you can also generalize. Three is oral history is the visual human, right? And aerial photographs is more about the environment and the landscape. Oral history is micro scale, right? Aerial photography can be any scale. It's limited, of course, by your labor and computer power that you have. But you can do this, right? The trees you could count at the level of say the Surabaya Regency, or whole of East Java, whole of Java, whole of Indonesia, whole of Southeast Asia, or maybe the whole world. There is a project in Nature that was out a couple of years ago, and they used a machine to count big trees in Africa between the equator and the savanna, and the computer, this is satellite image, it's very high resolution, only one series can use. And they extracted, the machine extracted 9.9 billion trees. 9.9 billion trees. They counted them, they measured them, and they used it in the formula, they used it to calculate how much CO2 was actually stored in these trees. Right? Now, with our method, if you use aerial photographs, you can do the same thing. You can see how CO2 storage in the trees changed from the 1940s all the way to the present. Okay, then we have oral history is key to identify, interpret, and analyze historical features in the photographies. The labeling is key. The aerial photographs is very important. It shows changes, but it's very descriptive. You need people, all the stories that people interview, right? Because if you interview all people about the past, they're not just informed, they're not just offering data, they are doing history work. They're giving you a history, they're giving you analysis, they're giving you interpretation. Right, which is very critical, of course. Right? We historians do that too, but we historians live in the present. We haven't seen it. Right? So oral history is also very important for the analysis. And of course, aerial photography with AI, it offers data, but no interpretation, no real analysis. Right? You can say, oh, there are more I don't know what. Again, we have to tell it what to see. Without labeling, it has no idea what to see. Almost there. Okay, so I just want to show you a few pictures of Indonesia. Or, and it shows actually, it's an illustration of the problem that we have, because it's very difficult to find photos. Online, all the photos are almost all obliques. It's weird because most aerial photographs are verticals. But the reason is the obliques, they're only on the net because it's sort of like a little bit, what do you call it, taboo. Right? In the Netherlands, you have a lot of these are Netherlands websites.
Yes.
And they chose the photos, because it shows the old India, the old Indonesia. So this is actually, I know what they are. So this is, did you recognize this already?
Yes.
No, this is actually, you can see where we are. This is sugar plantation. Yeah, it's a sugar plantation of Gudu Jombang in East Java. I don't know where it is. This is a photo from 1926. So probably it's from the Institute for the Tropics. Yes, and this is actually the airport of the Knil Damo Surabaya. But of course, this didn't exist anymore. So that's probably why you don't recognize it. And this is, it is coming. This is, it's not coming. Next one is an aerial photograph of Kuala Lumpur in Aceh. It's not coming, okay. Oh, no, there it is. Oh. And then I have, is this the one? No, this is Kuala. Sorry, the one before was an airport also. Actually, this is actually also. Okay, here is a little bit weird. This is a little bit side show, but it has also to do with GIS. So I had this is a copy of the old 1884 Dutch map of Aceh, right? And it indicated trees. And it indicated about 100 trees, and many of them were in Muslim graves. So we went into this landscape and we tried to find the trees, right? So I think it was 1884. So we used GIS first. We found 20 of the 80 trees are still standing. And they were on little hills and Muslim graves. Some of them went back to the 16th century. Right. So again, interesting illustration of how, I talk about oral history as key, but the trees also are pretty key in the landscape to be able to identify the features. Okay. Yeah, sorry, I forgot about this. So this is one of the trees we identified, right? Is the gravestone. In this so we got to do the slide. Sorry about that. I can't read this one. Can you read it? All right, this is just a few ideas how we could do, what kind of collaborations you could do. I have difficulty reading myself. This is actually the wrong slide I see now. Oh, no. Sorry, I did this presentation in Vietnam. Sorry. I see I forgot that Vietnam at the bottom. So one thing is that, so this project, if we do it in ECR, we create a lot of data. But my project is not really about the data, because we're using a to create a methodology, because we're doing this in 8 to 10 countries, right? Because if you do it only for Namibia, the methodology works for Namibia, but nowhere else, right? Because you labeled it, you identified the historical information for Namibia, and it shows the Namibian environment. So what we want to do is we want to do this in 8 to 10 countries, right? And then we get a methodology that's much more generally applicable, and can then, if you then use it, say for syllabus, right? You take the methodology that are already there, that has been trained for 8 to 10 countries, and you do the, for 10 square kilometers, you do the labeling of the local photos with local historical information. Then you add that to the methodology, and then the idea is that it will read it, it will machine read it for a much larger area for the whole of Celebes. Right? That's sort of the idea. Right? So it means, for instance, that I'm just making up something here for an example. So for instance, we are focusing on the rural areas because the rural areas are more challenging, because the features are much smaller, farms, plots, homes are much smaller, right? In the urban landscape, you have big linear buildings and streets that are much easier to identify. But for example, as we do East Java, this will include Surabaya. So if we find the photos for all of East Java, including Surabaya, right? For instance, an MA or a PhD project, right here at the university, could be that somebody actually analyzes the material for Surabaya and see how the city, right, from its colonial, relatively small size, expanded into the surrounding area, right? And you can see, right, all the surface features you can identify. So you can see how fast and into what areas it expanded, right? That would be, for instance, an interesting, and you can use our methodology actually to identify, right, to train the machine to do a rather rapid, or even, okay, that's maybe too big for right now, but you could do that for all the major cities in ECR, because you have the data, right? And also what we would like to do is to train in each country that we're working for an interdisciplinary team of 3 people, one historian, because historian is pretty key, one a GIS person who knows about machine learning, and one a computer science student. So we're thinking of probably MA level, maybe PhD level, and the data, and they could use the data from the project for the case study that they're working on to write a PhD, right? Or not write a PhD, and the computer scientist who would be sort of, showing the methodology, how it works for East Java and how it could be expanded to use all over the country, right? Because that's also a thing we want to do, is to, because it's my project is there for 5 years. It's relatively small, but what we can do is with our partners is we can do the training, right? Because we're developing this methodology. And so the idea is to train your team, your country team, during the time of the project, right? And then by year 3 or 4, your country team, right, is ready to design its own project. And then depending on, of course, the priorities of Arlanga and sort of national priority, they can say, okay, we want to develop a project based on this methodology, right? And this will all be open access, right? This is not Princeton is not going to copyright this. This is all open access, right? So we share everything. So, right, you could say, well, we're interested. So my colleagues from Sri Lanka, they're interested in coastal erosion and mangrove. And with this methodology, we can see the individual mangrove trees, right? And you can measure coastal erosion and changes to sub 1 meter. Right? So it's very, very precise. So that's a project they want to do. So the idea is that you would have a team in place by year 3, You then develop your own project. The team develops its own priority project, whether it's national, in Java, or whatever it is. Because my team will the team I have, I only have for 5 years. So the model person and the GIS specialist, I only have them for these 5 years. Right. So if by year 3 or 4 your team is ready, we can still give feedback in the design, fundraise, right? National level, maybe national level. So we can still give you feedback so that by year 5, your team is set, you can start the project because we won't be there anymore to support you. Right? So that's sort of the idea. And then the many other, I think, possibilities. I won't get into that. I'll get to the, I think, the last slide. Yeah, the conclusion, right? So the combination of oral history, GIS, and machine learning, right, unlocks the unused potential of the enormous collections of 1940s, 1990s historical aerial photograph in Namibia, which I showed you, Indonesia, and worldwide. And this is also important. Right now, right, we have this kind of data, but only from about 2000 onwards using high resolution satellite imaging, right? Because with high resolution satellite imaging, we can do all of this already. And they're doing all kinds of things. But they can't go before 2000 because the satellite imagery, its resolution is very poor. It's like Landsat, this famous one, it's 50 to 60 meters. You can't do this. And you can't use this methodology that they use with satellite imagery today. It can't be used for aerial photography because aerial photography is black and white, and satellite imagery it uses 4 bands, including infrared. So you can't use it. So you have to use our methodology using the history, the labeling, training data, blah blah blah. And then, right? So right now, we only have this high resolution data from satellite images for about 20-25 years, right? If we can include aerial photography, you can analyze it in the same way, right? You can quadruple the timeline, right? Now, this is not only, I'm a historian, I love history, I'm already happy with this, we can do this, but it has many, many more implications because all the computer modeling we now do and creating all these scenarios for the climate, this is all based on historical data. It's all based on the analysis of these satellite images for the last 20 years. But of course, 20 years, as any historian and any geologist will tell you, that's nothing, right? You could be talking, it might be an error, right? But if we can include another 50 years, or maybe more, the aerial photographs for Indonesia is 1920. I don't know how many already, but that means that the data you have to create your models have much more time depth, right? So they're much more reliable than the ones we have, you know, again, 20 years is really nothing. Historical, you know, modeling, future 20 years, nothing, you know, it's a blip, right? So if we can increase that 3 times, 4 times, so that's also an implication, right? So, but you see here, right? So for historical purposes, this is a great resource, although very challenging, right? But it has implications far beyond historical data, right? So, yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to share this. I hope it was not too relevant. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. And now was the session on question. Special, please. And then just. Oh.
There's some switch somewhere. Oh, this is the master.
Yeah.
Press this one.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Am I audible? Okay. For processor, we, I will, read my question. Urban photography and environmental history provide a richer academic lens with document and power side over long periods. However, frontline conservation activities such as those at Sea Shepherd or the Captain Paul Watson Foundation often have to act in real time against the ecological threats in remote marine areas where historical archives or baseline aerial data might not exist. In your view, where is the main methodological challenge or bridge when trying to adapt this historical long-term aerial analysis into a practical tool for rapid advocacy and environmental activism? Because my question is highlights the real gap between broadcasting, which operates using extensive slow moving historical data, and activism, which must move rapidly to confront crimes as it did. Thank you. That is my question.
Thank you. You were interrupted a few times, so I'm not sure. I tried to reframe your question. You were saying, what about areas where there's not much archival documentation or photographs? Is that what you were saying?
Yes.
Okay, so the thing is, archives are usually very select, right? Because they're written by a very small group of people usually, and they're usually written for a very specific purpose. Right, so let's say a king, if we talk about 16th century, a king wants to know, how much tax does each area is able to provide. Right, so that's very specific. Modern archives are usually also very focused. So the majority of, say, modern agricultural archives would be two things. One is archives of research institutes. So, we did that. I can't remember what city that was. We went to the sugarcane research lab, just colonial, late 19th century. We visited that. So those archives are usually not representative of what most of the peasants are doing, because it's a sort of lab, right? They do research in a very specific place, and it's done by scientists. So what they produce there is not very representative of what the peasants in the same period do, right? So that's the problem. Or the other kind of archives are about total production. Right, so the colonial archive would say, okay, Surabaya Regency, you have to say something, like for General Regency in 1942 produced so many tons of sugarcane, right? So many tons of tobacco. So neither of those give much information on how people live, how the regular peasants produce, right? So that's what I'm saying. That's where oral history is very important. But of course, there's an issue which I think Mr. Holland put about. Sorry, it's great now. Sorry. For instance, is concerned about, right? He and his colleagues, they try to get oral history of combatants, veterans of of the revolution. But of course, most of them have died already, right? So that's another issue with oral history. If we don't do the history, oral history now of people who are in their 70s, 80s, 90s, 20 years from now, we lose those people and we lose all their history. So, fine. Okay, then the third one is the aerial photography. Aerial photography, okay, the issue is, has it survived? That's the issue. I know there were many aerial photographs made of ECR, because I have the reports of it. The problem is, have they survived? But if they survive, they show all of ECR. Cities like Surabaya, the Bear, and also the most remote villages are depicted on these photos. So for instance, one thing we're trying to do, but it's very difficult, we try to interview people in their old homes. Okay, many old people, of course, don't live in their old homes. But we try to do that because then we can say their old plot, right, that they were living already in 1940s, 1950s. And we ask them, okay, where was your house in the old days? Where was your parents' house? That tree, how old is it? Was it already there when you were a young child? Right? And then we take the GPS coordinates of these positions. Via the aerial photographs, we can actually identify the tree or their parents' house on the aerial photo through the GPS. Right? So you can recover the history. Right? That otherwise it would be completely lost. See, that's why I'm focusing on, I'm using archival history too, but it usually doesn't have the data, the very specific data we need to identify individual homes or trees, which then help us sort of label the area for. So I think in that sense, it has the potential also to recover a history that is usually left out in the regular archives as storage. Yeah, I hope that sort of answered the question.
Yeah, okay, that is very clear answer for me, and thank you for answering my question. Thank you. Yeah, that's. Second. Thank you, Professor. I have some questions. Now we are looking to the history, not for the future about this project. Could a similar technique potentially be used to reconstruct some significant events, for example, the massacre of villagers in Kosovo by cross-referencing the Gasparin's archive with the local oral history testimonies, such as where they pinpointing the row of a couple trees where the execution took place, the mass grave, single shelter or convent built at that time, with the in the area of photography and the oral history. And also, like in some cases, we make an article about war, and some people still remember that in the past we heard from our parents. They also have special rules like a prison, but can we use the same technique to illocate and then to make another writings about it?
Yes, you think so. I think your example about if we have oral history about the massacre saying it happened here and here, especially if we know where that place is, or with somebody we interview, we can go to the location right, where it happened, and they say, here's the master, or here's the tree where people were shot, or here's the trash. Right, so there's this famous photo, I think you know it, there's a very famous photo, at least very famous in the Netherlands, and it shows actually an execution, it shows two photos. There's a little trench, maybe you know it, so it looks on the edge of the road, some bushes. And there are these Dutch soldiers standing there, and they make, I think it was, they make the TNI men, or the young men, but the TNI, they make much of a difference in those days for the young men or kids. They made them lay down, and there is another photo that are clearly going to show the death. Right? If, say, the oral history or the other or the Marine Brigade, or you could identify, okay, this is here and here, right? So you could go two ways. You could go two ways. If in the photo you see specific features that you maybe can identify an aerial photograph, you could use the aerial photograph or you locate this, a little bit more difficult. It will be a little bit easier if you can just go there and get the GPS coordinates, and then you can use that to find it on the aerial photograph. But you know, I have to say this: you can only do this after you do this process of geo-reference, because an aerial photograph that you find like this, you don't know where it is. Right, so there needs to be. That's why I said, well, this is all great, but you have to geo-references. You have to locate that photo exactly. You have to find the real world coordinates location of that photo. So yes, then you can do it. Now, a little problem would be is, but ideally you would want to have photos of the time in which the incident took place. The Dutch took many aerial photographs a year ago.
Yeah.
But for the Marine Brigade, I found files where they say we put all our aerial photographs in, you know, a number of huge metal boxes, and we sent our ship to the Netherlands, and they never arrived. So that's a little bit of an issue. It could be an issue. So there are wartime photographers, because they did it. They wanted to see where the positions of the TNI was, and so they did a lot of photography. What the photography can't do is you can't look into buildings or below vegetation. It's the photos, so it gets. So I'm not, but you would be able maybe to see. Again, I haven't been in Jakarta, Surabaya, and find there. So a big priority of this project would be to see, are there aerial photographs? Where are they? What's the issue? But in principle, if there is photos from, say, 1950s, you might still be able to see on the aerial photographs things like camps, prison camps, or military camps, or TNI camps, maybe even tracks that they made through the mountains or through vegetation. Because it takes 5 or 10 years for vegetation. But it's a little bit like you've heard that sometimes they use aerial photographs to find archaeology. Right? So if there's a big camp or a big fortified position, in photos just after the war, you could probably identify these locations. So for instance, I'm very interested in a photo series. So I was in Namibia in 1991 to 93. This is a year after the South Africans pulled out and made it independent. And I remember from driving around there, all the South African military camps, including the ones where they helped to torture prisoners, still exist. But of course, 10 years later, they were all eagle-eyed. People had built houses and hotels, so that all infrastructure no longer visible to them. But the aerial photograph will show everything that's happening. So that's probably also possible with Indonesian aerial photography. You can still As is, you can see very high, again, you can see very, these water holes are really, I was amazed that you could see that they're this big. You can identify them with a training machine. So that could be, right, so. Again, I haven't done this. No, we did it. I've seen it in photographs from World War One. They've done this too. They photographed World War One. They could identify the hole. So the Van Moot, I'm thinking of the Van Moot line. Right? It was not a World War One fortification line. I don't know if the Dutch. They had positions there along the line. I'm not sure if you can see that. Graves is a fresh nuclear seed. So they used actually for World War II, they used aerial photographs to identify mass graves. But you can only do that if there's no trees completely covered. So maybe photos just from the war and just after the war, they might be most promising to do that. But again, if you have oral history and people say, okay, you take us to the site where this happened, and you take the GPS reads, you can pinpoint it all aerial photograph. You can see if you can see any indication on the aerial photograph that confirms the existence of whatever feature. Yeah, so sorry, I was thinking aloud to take a little bit of things. But so the answer is yes, I think that would be quite a lot of possibility. But again, you would need the historical data, right? You can't do this on its own because you need to know you or all history people using, they would have to describe, okay, what do these features look like? What I haven't done, which is the possibility also, is to actually take some of the photographs, enlarge them, and take them to people who lived at that time and say, what is this, what is this, what is this? You would think that people can't identify it. Actually, turns out anthropologists have done this, and actually they found that even rural peasants, even without education, can say, oh, this is my house, this is the tree next to my mother's house, that tree indicates the grave of my father. They are able to read these abstract photographs beyond my comprehension. I don't know how they. You think that a peasant has never seen an aerial photograph, they can't do it, but anthropologists have done this worldwide, and people are really very, very capable of identifying all kinds of details. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good possibility. Sounds like a great project. Yeah.
Thank you, because I have asking you at the box, so that's we should know it. We don't know history of children, this district. I think it's connected with your topic, because I think this such alternative source of our history here. May I know about this? How to get great when we can some before history, and that's your point. Side of the story and the categories your stories and the yeah, that is something we have to spend it
How can complementary, right?
okay, get to it, one from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, yeah, maybe you can do sort of. I actually teach a course at Princeton that looks at all the sort of the non-usuals of oral history, digital history, photographs, aerial photographs, maps.
Yeah.
So maybe we can do some next year or another time, some workshop style. series of lectures to train students in this. Yeah, I think that would be very interesting. Yeah. Yeah,
And to create like a survey capability.
yeah, that would be most fun.
Yeah. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I want to ask. Is it possible if your methodology, aerial and machine learning, right, in the history of natural disasters? Because Indonesia is a country with numerous volcanoes. Volcanoes.
Volcanoes.
Yeah, it's a then lake and others. So is it it's type of warfare?
No, this project is a little bit more for specific. This project, my oral history project for the book,
Yeah.
looks at war. This project does not look at war. Well, okay. The thing with volcanoes, of course, is that volcanoes are not. Yeah, you can, but you can only go back to 1920s. The Dutch all collected pictures of volcanoes. But we were in. That's not Japan. We were in Japan. The historical society there was doing this project about. They were doing an environmental project, and they were going to. It was not Germany, it was a little village outside of Denver. And the historical society there, many of them were actually students from the University of Japan in history, English. They were going to the peasants, and they were making an inventory of minor earth movements caused by pressure, volcanic pressure. And they had identified 100 sites on where, so if the vegetation is not too dense, if it's a rural area and it's fields, you could actually mark this on GPS. Then you could see if you can find those sites, what they look like in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. So you could indeed then do sort of see what's happening. When this activity is dense, how widespread is it? Yeah, in theory you could do that. But again, you can't have very dense vegetation. Well, actually, I'm thinking, yeah, well, it might help because, but you can see if it's the vegetation is alive or dead.
Yes.
So if these volcanic formations release gases or heat that kills the vegetation, you would be able to see in the because it's black and white, it's shades of gray, and you can see. Oh, I didn't show that here, but we can actually see. We can identify some trees on aerial photography because they are greener, darker than other trees. So you might be able, even if it's dense vegetation, you might not be able to say something, derive indirectly information about volcanic. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Another question. We still have, 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
If,
Um,
if there is no question, then maybe let. Okay, thank you, Prof. Geiger, for this very insightful talk. That it reminded me about the research actually that last year. I think it must have been as well. So Surabaya famous with kampung. So Surabaya has so many kampungs that started to be developed by the local government, and then become the theme kampung. For example, Kampung Peneleh that after we did the research on oral history and then photography. So we took some pictures of the some spots of the Kampung Peneleh. And then with the English department and Indonesian department, we teach them how to write a narrative story. Yeah. So based on the picture, they start to write the story based on their own memory about the past. That's for the participant, maybe the adult one or the old one. And then about the current situation, that's for participant teenagers or even kids. So we can understand what happened in Kampung Peneleh from the past up to now. And then based on the result of this oral history, written in a narrative story, published in a book, then anyone who wants to know about Kampung Peneleh, they can read.
Yeah.
So it brings me the idea about your methods. So maybe it can also be done in Surabaya in mapping the history about Surabaya. Because Surabaya become historical tourism now. So everyone wants to learn about the history, especially about independence or about the colonial era. So Surabaya is the right place to learn about it compared to others. For example, Bali and Jogja is more about natural tourism.
Yeah.
But in Surabaya, it's about more historical tourism. What do you think about it?
I think that would be a great project. Yeah, I think that works because what the aerial photography adds to that, it adds two things. One, you can see how the city changed. And probably people will be able to identify on the aerial photograph, oh, that's the house of my father, right? And also, unlike historical documentation, right? If you share an archive with people that they can't read, Dutch or whatever, right? It's some use, but these photos, the photographs are things that they can interact with. So, yeah, I think that would work very well, and it will give you a base as a historian, not only data, but also a way to visualize it in a way that is easier to share. Right? You could make a little exhibition, for instance, using aerial photographs, right? And you can locate everything. So if you have regular photos of somebody's house, like normal photos from the front, you can sort of, do a big little exhibition and put a red piece of cloth from the house saying, this is actually the house. So in terms of the visual, in how you can share the data, right, and visualize the history, it is of course much more powerful than any. But for us historians, we like the written, right? But if we want to share this with larger communities, young and old people, I think visual sources have an advantage, right? You know that well, because that's how you can share the history with a much larger public. Again, just I love writing these books, but my mother complained that she would be. I said, but Mom, I'm trying to make it so that people can read it. No joy, but I got past one paragraph, and then he said, no, it's too much. No, but that is, I think that is critical because, right, how do we share the history much broader? That is a problem. I wish I could write bestsellers, right, that everybody would read it. But that's also not most people experience history through monuments, right, or exhibitions, or photo books, or things like that. So I think that, and that's where I think, look, photographs are almost, regular photographs are a little bit out of context. You don't know where they are unless you know the place. The aerial photographs are good because they create a map. They're the map of the real world. So they are an excellent combination with regular aerial photographs. You can just say, well, this is there, this is there, this is there. People will know where it is. They will see it in space. Yeah, I think that is very powerful for health.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm still like to us.
Of course.
I get the case of question. Or section which I have been trying to learn about math and finding things like and helps me imagine if it's one sort of way, but I think how accurate would aerial photo predict the changes to the landscape? Or, for example, if we're talking about conservations of historical sites that are located in around the riverbanks or the coastal area, they are prone to erosions, right? So, how accurate would this photograph be for us to predict the changes we might anticipate?
Over the future. Yeah, that's the look, because you know what I'm saying about climate modeling, that's modeling. There I'm saying the more data we have, the better the model. But that's in a very sort of abstract level. You're asking more directly interpreting the photos. I think a single aerial photograph wouldn't do anything for that. If you have a series, right, if you have 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, that's useful because you can see how things can change. Of course, it never stays the same. Right? That's the thing about it. Seems the same often, it's not the same. But of course, so you can see so it gives you, or it's maybe a little bit abstract, but sort of seeing history in general and seeing these historical photos in general, it gives you more than one possibility in your head. So that's what I like history, because I don't like to talk about politics, but of course, this book and this idea of environment science being used for Palestine and Gaza, and also Ukraine. I'm not writing about those two because I don't want to be in trouble. But so I like sort of historical analogy. We talk about problems that are problems today, you use history. Usually you keep that is important because you keep people don't get immediately put right. If I start talking in this lecture in America or here, I would talk about Gaza or Ukraine, it would politicize it immediately. In America right now, you know, if you mention one or the other, it's like in Europe it's the same. And I guess here it is too, because I saw many Palestine, free Palestine. So I'm interested in these questions, but I like to, you know, history has an advantage, you keep the dialogue open, right? If I talk about the past, although there are many parallels, people still keep their minds open. They're not immediately say, no, I don't want to give it. I have my opinion. Right? And okay, so how does that relate to your question? I think it does, because if you can see 1940s, the riverbank was here, 1950s it was here, 1960s it was here, 1970s. So when you then start sort of planning for the future, you know, oh wait a minute, the riverbank can actually, right? There can be, the flooding can go way beyond, for instance, 1950 maybe, the flooding went way beyond the riverbed. So we know there's a historic possibility that, hey, this area can flood. So then you know, it's probably make good sense then not to build your house there and not to sow your crops there because you don't know. 2027, it might repeat itself. Not. But at least you have, I think, you have mentally the options. That's, I think, why politicians should, I'm not getting politics. I think why politicians should read history much more. Because then they're aware of, politicians, I mean, I won't say politicians, they think 4 or 5 years. Because that's their time frame, elections. But if we want to deal with the environment and many other issues, we need long-term planning. Because you need to know, you need to be aware, wait a minute, things might change for the worse or the better. You don't know these things. So I think from that perspective, so that's where it helps. Because history doesn't repeat itself in the same way. It would say history repeats itself. It never does it the same way. But for instance, what the revolution, for instance, Mr. Holler, I had many opportunities to talk with him, so right, and he's very aware of these things. But we need to know about it. However painful it is, right, for a Dutch person to hear about these awful torture and massacres. We need to know about this because we need to realize, look, right, in theory, at least this is what we think, right, out of ourselves, that we are pretty liberal people. We generally don't do these things. But the revolution and the colonial era proves that even nice guys like me can do horrible things, right, under certain circumstances. And not just once, but systematically so, right? So we need to know this. We need to be aware, the young people, the old people need to be aware of that if under the, I can't say the right condition, but under certain conditions, people who normally wouldn't torture people, right, start torturing people and massacring, young boys and raping young girls. And I think that is important because we like to think, oh right, because these soldiers that came here, right, these young men in 1945, 1946, many of them had been involved in resistance. They came here with ideals. We're going to liberate. Okay, of course they had the wrong idea. They thought, oh, we come to liberate Indonesians from this horrible Japanese suppression. So they came with, many of them came with good intentions. They didn't come here to torture. Maybe a few did, but But under the circumstances, right, the majority of them did engage in these things. I actually found a letter where he's a German officer, now the Dutch officer, says, but we're starting to behave here exactly like the Nazis in the Netherlands. How is this possible? We fought the Nazis for 5 years, and now we're doing exactly the same, right? I think that is important because if we sort of say, oh, it's the Nazis doing it, right? Or we couldn't do things like that. So I think that's where I think, again, going back to your question, sorry, very long philosophical answer again, faster again, off the rails. But I think, yeah, history is important because you see how things that are not like today, how they could be different. And that can be very bad, and it can be very good. Depending on circumstances. And right, so it's a little bit describing the sweet little kids from the Netherlands did these horrible things. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Prof. speaker, and come to the end of the session. We try to thank you for all of the participants here. Yeah. So maybe we can close the session. Yeah, we will taking picture together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kita take picture.